it's Frida and welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to be starting with a pressure cooker creamy mashed potato recipe. I'm going to go ahead and get started, and then once we get it going we will talk about what kind of potatoes to use and how I really enjoy this recipe. First of all, I'm using an Instant Pot pressure cooker, and I'm going to turn the camera down so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, some pressure cookers have a trivet in here, and you can use your trivet providing your potatoes are cut large enough that they won't go through. But today I'm going to change my mind and use this steamer basket instead, right here. And then I'm going to put 1 cup of water in, and my potatoes. This is 2 pounds of potatoes. I'm going to check and make sure my seal is seated all the way around. That's important. And then I'm going to put the lid on, lock it, make sure it's set to sealing, not venting. And then I'm going to use high pressure for 6 minutes. Counting down to 6 minutes. Okay. Then it's going to heat up the water and create some steam and then create some pressure. And when it gets to pressure, this float valve will come up and this will seal. Let me bring the camera back up. So, okay. This is a recipe that my mom has used for 40 years, a long time. I grew up with a mom who used a stovetop pressure cooker. So I was used to seeing a pressure cooker in the kitchen. And I always had pressure cooker potatoes, mashed potatoes, soups, stews. That's just what I grew up with. And one time we went camping and my mom did not bring her stovetop pressure cooker. She did the potatoes on the stovetop. And she drained the potatoes and she put the milk and the butter in, whipped it up and everything, and everybody commented on how different these potatoes tasted. Not necessarily bad, but it was kind of an off taste for us. And my mom said, well, I think it's because we pressure cook our potatoes. And when you use pressure cooking, this is essentially steaming the potatoes. And pressure cooking keeps a lot of the nutrients inside the pressure cooker, so you do get a much fresher flavor when you are pressure cooking. So that's been my experience with pressure cooking potatoes. And the creamy mashed potatoes start with the right potato. Today I am using these russet potatoes. This is a medium-sized potato. Costco sized potatoes are much larger. Something smaller would be small, so this is considered medium. So if you don't have a scale and weighing your potatoes, 2 pounds of potatoes is about 5 or 6 of these medium potatoes. And you want to use, for a fluffy texture, you want to use a potato that's very high in starch. Now, you may have noticed if you boil potatoes on the stove and drain them and try to use a mixer or hand mixer or something like that, potatoes get really gluey and starchy. Well, that's because the starch granules in the potatoes, when they're exposed to heat, they swell. And when they swell, they absorb moisture. So when potatoes are sitting in the water, they will absorb all that extra starch and moisture and everything, and they will become gluey when you try to mash them. So the fluffiest textured mashed potatoes start with a russet potato or a Yukon Gold potato, which is also another really good choice. Waxy potatoes like reds and whites they're just waxy, and when you try to use a mixer and mash them, it takes a lot of mashing to make them smooth and creamy. And because of that extra mashing, your potatoes will get that pasty, gluey texture. So today we want light, fluffy, creamy potatoes. And it starts with a russet or the Yukon Gold, which has a really buttery texture. So the next thing is to talk about cutting your potatoes. After you peel your potatoes, you can keep your skins on if you want. Wash your potatoes really well. Red potatoes have a thinner skin, And Yukon Golds, I think, have a thinner skin than the russets do. So if you want to keep your skins on, that's totally up to you to start with a clean washed potato, or you can peel your potatoes. This is one of my favorite potato peelers here. It's a Rubbermaid, something that just really sharp, peels really well and quickly. And then the next thing you want to do is make sure your potatoes are uniform in size when you cut them. The smaller you cut the potato, the less time it takes to cook. The larger or the thicker you cut your potato slices, then the longer it will take. This recipe, I quarter my medium potatoes or use a 2-inch slice. So if you've got those extra large Costco sized potatoes, just slice them every 2 inches and you're good to go for a 6-minute cook time. I can hear the steam coming up in my pressure cooker, and it still says on, so what it's doing is heating that water, and the water is creating steam. Now, you may see some recipes that use mashed potatoes that make it all in one pot. That's great. You may have the texture that you like mashing it directly in the pot, but I prefer to cook my potatoes above the water. This steams the potatoes and then doesn't absorb all of that extra starch. You'll notice after my potatoes are done, when I take them out, there will be kind of that starchy looking water underneath that steamer basket that we've got there. Talking about steamer baskets, you don't have to have a special piece of equipment here. You're cutting your potatoes large enough that they will fit on top of this trivet here. And you take your potatoes out. If you have a potato that falls out, no big deal, just scoop it out and drain the potatoes. Another steamer basket option is this one. This is the Rsvp steamer basket. It used to have handles on it, and the reason there's no handles on it is because with the handles, they did not fit inside of my pressure cooker. So you would bend the handles up. Well, after bending them to a point, they break off. There are some steamer baskets that you can find for your 6-quart, your 8-quart pressure cooker that do have a handle on it, which make it much, much easier to steam your vegetables or potatoes or carrots. This is awesome for when you're making broths or soup stock, when you put all your bones in there and your veggies and onions and leftovers, put it in there and makes a fantastic stock, and then you can just bring it out here and it automatically strains it. So this is something I use quite a bit often. So let's see, we talked about potatoes and we talked about steamer baskets. If you're just joining me right now, my name is Frida, and I have a website called Frida Loves Bread. It does a lot of baking, cooking, and pressure cooking, shares tips and recipes. And you are watching me live on my Facebook page, and we are making pressure cooked mashed potatoes. We've talked about what kind of potatoes to use to make a creamy, light, fluffy texture. And I have really enjoyed pressure cooking. Like I said, I grew up watching my mother use a stovetop pressure cooker. And when I got my very first electric pressure cooker, I was really excited. This was about 9 years ago. I love the fact that these electric pressure cookers have a lot of safety features in them. If there's too much pressure, there's a valve in there that drops and releases pressure and maintains it. There is a float valve in there that's like a pin that locks the pressure cooker. So while your cooker is under pressure, you cannot even open it. It locks it. It's safe to use. And the outside of the pressure cooker, it just stays warm to the touch. It's not hot, so there's no way you can burn yourself by touching the outside of the cooker. I love that. When I used my stovetop pressure cooker on the stove, in order to bring down the pressure, I would have to take it from the stove and bring it to my sink and then drizzle a little bit of cool water to cool the pot and reduce the pressure. Well, you don't have to do that with an electric pressure cooker. It is so much easier to be able to quickly release the pressure, and this recipe will use a quick release. Now, there's a couple of different kinds of releases when you are learning about pressure cooking. The first one is the quick release. When your pressure cooker comes to pressure, like it has right now, the full pin has come up and then it will start counting. It's at full pressure right now. After the cook time is over, A quick release is simply opening that pressure valve and releasing a lot of steam, which quickly reduces the temperature in your pressure cooker. And your safety valve, the float valve right there, as soon as the pressure is reduced to a safe level, that float valve will drop and will allow you to open up your pressure cooker. That is called a quick release. Now there is what's called a natural release. A natural release is simply not doing anything right after the cook time. After your cooking has ended, then you just sit and you wait. And you wait for the pot to cool down naturally on its own. When it reaches a certain temperature and pressure, that float pan will drop and then you can open it. That is called a natural release. There is a third kind of release, and that's called a controlled quick release. And that is used when you are cooking pasta, applesauce, oatmeal, anything that can tend to foam. In beans is another good example. Anything that can foam during cooking. And what a controlled quick release is simply moving that pressure valve, just toggling it back and forth until you feel like there's not going to be any spewing or starchy liquid that's coming out of that pressure valve. So we move it, toggle it a couple of times back and forth, and when you are certain that there's not going to be any food spewing out of there, then you can open it all the way and naturally release, quickly release the rest of that pressure. So we've talked about quick release, a natural release, and a controlled quick release. The fourth kind of release is called a timed natural release. For example, you might have like a pot roast recipe where it calls for a 15-minute natural release. That means when you are done cooking, the timer is finished on your pressure cooker, you will set your timer for 15 minutes and allow your pot to naturally come down in pressure for 15 minutes. Your food is still cooking during that time. So after the 15 minutes, then you open up your pressure valve all the way for a quick release. Another example of a timed natural release is when you are hard cooking eggs. I love making hard-cooked eggs in my pressure cooker. Why? I don't have to babysit the eggs on the stove. There's no boilovers on there, and they peel so easily. It's great. So after my eggs are done cooking, it calls for a 4-minute timed natural release. So when it's done cooking, I set my timer for 4 minutes. After the 4 minutes is over, I open up the pressure valve, and my eggs go into an ice water bath to cool. Hi Larianne, hi Karen, thank you for joining me today and welcome to my kitchen. We are talking about making pressure cooked creamy mashed potatoes, and this is a recipe that I've been using for a long time. I believe it's been 40 years. My mom used this recipe on the stovetop pressure cooker, and she just added a pinch of this and a pinch of that, and it took me a while to figure out the exact measurements and ingredients. So I'm really excited to share this recipe with you today because it does have measurements. So this right here is still cooking down for 5 minutes. It's reached full pressure. Now it's at 4 minutes. So I have a little bit of time to answer any questions that you may have about pressure cooking in general, or about what are your plans for Thanksgiving. What is the go-to food that you need to have on your Thanksgiving table? In my family, it's the dinner rolls, the hot buttery dinner rolls. Unfortunately, this is where my oven used to be, and it caught on fire a couple of weeks ago, and I will be making hot dinner rolls in my oven. I probably will go downstairs where I have another oven, or to my mom's house to bake the dinner rolls, but we have to have dinner rolls and they have to be homemade. Once you have homemade, it's really hard to go back. I will say though, Costco is a really good runner-up when it comes to homemade rolls. The second thing, hi Sandy, welcome. Good to have you here. Now the second thing we absolutely have to have is the turkey. Now we've always had the full turkey with the breast meat and the thigh meat and everything, but come to find out my family really just likes the white meat only. So I did a turkey breast in my oven for several years. And I tried a bone-in turkey breast in my pressure cooker, and while the results were okay, there were still some dry parts near the bottom where it was near the heating element of my pressure cooker. I have found that a boneless turkey breast, the Jennie-O, it's called the oven ready, where you don't have to season it or anything. You just take it out of the bag and you put it in your oven, and it takes like a couple of hours to cook. Well, you can use that in your pressure cooker, put it in frozen, and cook it, and it's ready in an hour. I absolutely love the fact, because I don't have to thaw out the turkey. I can't remember to take the turkey out of the freezer 3-4 days in advance and stick it in my fridge to thaw out. Many times I'm in my sink trying to rotate the water. The boneless turkey breast oven ready, it's by Jennie-O. Butterball also has one. It's called a turkey roast. It comes in a netting, probably has a mix of white meat and dark meat. It's an absolute time saver, and you know what? If you like all white meat, that's the way to go. It will free you up to do many other things for your Thanksgiving dinner and enjoy your family. And oh, Larianne says her family loves ham. That is a very good alternative to have for your Thanksgiving dinner. Ham can also be warmed up in your pressure cooker as well. It's fully cooked, and so you just wrap it up in aluminum foil, put it in your pressure cooker with some water. It's very similar to a crock pot recipe, only you can get it done much, much more quickly using your pressure cooker. We're down to about 2 minutes here on our creamy mashed potatoes. We will be doing a quick release, and it will be noisy. The first time I did a quick release with my friend, I forgot to tell her that it was going to be really noisy when I opened it. She nearly jumped out of her skin when we did this. So be prepared that for your first time pressure cooking with that quick release, it will be noisy. You may have pets that are sensitive to noise. So if that's the case, you may want to train your pets and give them a kibble or a treat or something till they associate this noise with something pleasant and happy. I have a 6-year-old puppy that's in her kennel right now, and we'll see how she does. I think she does pretty good. So we are getting ready down to the last minute. I'm really excited. This is just a simple milk, butter, salt, and pepper recipe. There are other variations you can do. You can use chicken stock. You can put in some cream cheese. Put in a couple of cloves of garlic in here, and it is amazing with some fresh rosemary. There's my timer right there. So I'm going to do a quick release, turn the camera down so you can see what that looks like. Okay, so there's my float valve. It's all the way up. This is my pressure valve right here. I'm going to turn it slightly away from the camera, and take about 1 minute. Okay, you could probably tell that it's getting much, much quieter, but this is still up, which means you cannot even open it. Wait for this to completely drop before you open it. Okay, we're getting very close now. It's very, very quiet. This metal part is hot. You don't want to touch any of this metal part here, but this black part is really warm. It's warm to the touch, but this will burn, so it's very important you don't touch any of the metal parts. It's not quite ready to open yet. It's very, very quiet. So it does take about a minute and a half to reduce the pressure. It'll take longer if you have more ingredients or a lot more liquid in your pressure cooker. It should drop down any second. Don't try to force it down, poke it with a fork or jiggle the lid or anything. Let this pin come down all by itself. Just the anticipation, right? It's getting there. Here we go, drop. Remember to open up the lid away from your face. There you go, there's a bunch of steam there. Okay, this steamer basket comes from IKEA. And it has a little thing here. Kind of a little top heavy. Not a big deal. Another reason why I kind of like that steamer basket. Just set it off to the side. Now you can see my water looks a little bit starchy. I'm going to just dump that out. Put this back in. Then I'm going to put my potatoes in here. What you want to do before you do this is use a fork and make sure your fork goes in easily in the potatoes. This tells you that they are completely done. If they're really, really hard to push the fork in, you want to close your pressure cooker and let it cook for another minute. This looks pretty good. Okay, now there are a couple of different ways that you can mix your potatoes. You can mash them. I like to use my KitchenAid mixer, but for this live demo, I'm going to keep it in the pot so you can see what happens. You can use electric beaters, or this is another one of my favorite tools, immersion blender. It's going to have a lot of noise just for a couple of minutes, but you want to mash your potatoes. You can use a potato masher, which is really great. That have a little, if you like your potatoes to be a little bit chunky, a potato masher is wonderful. Another method is using a potato ricer. A ricer really makes very smooth potatoes. I just do it up and down motion. Okay, now this is warmed milk and butter. When you're using this and mixing it, it will be a little bit runny at first, but it will thicken up nicely. Want to use some salt and pepper. And take a taste. Oh, this brings back so many good memories. Creamy, smooth, very quick to whip up, just salt and pepper. Now, if you are following a keto or a low carb diet, I do have a recipe that uses my pressure cooker where you put a whole head of cauliflower right on the trivet, a little bit of water, or you can put some chicken broth in there and cook your whole head of cauliflower in there. Break off the florets and take the core off, and then just mash it right in your pot with your chicken broth or chicken stock, and it's really, really good. It's not exactly the same thing as mashed potatoes, but it's really good. Thank you for joining me.